Ilara spent months dreaming of the day she would finally meet the man who had promised her a new life. But what she found when she stepped off the train was news that could destroy everything she had planned. The letter in her pocket was the only thing keeping Ilara Thorne standing. She pressed her fingers against the worn fabric of her coat, feeling the paper beneath, soft from being folded and unfolded 100 times during the long journey west. Gideon Hart's last letter, the one where he called her brave and worthy and said he was ready to build something real. She had read it so many times she could hear his voice, though she had never heard it at all. The train station at Silvage was small and dust-covered, the kind of place where the wind carried grit into your eyes and the wooden boards creaked beneath every step. Ilara descended from the passenger car slowly, her dark brown braid falling loose over one shoulder, her single travel bag hanging from her hand. Her emerald green skin caught the afternoon light. 2 children stopped and stared. Their mother pulled them away without a word. She was used to that. Ilara had left home with almost nothing. A small bundle of clothes, the letters, a few coins she had scraped together after selling what remained of her parents' belongings. They had been gone for 2 years now. Her mother and father, taken by a fever that moved through their settlement, the way fire moves through dry grass. After that, the debts came. Then the silence of a life with no future attached to it. She had found Gideon's advertisement in a newspaper that came from the west, yellowed and creased, passed from hand to hand until it reached her small community where humans and orcs lived in careful, quiet proximity. Rancher in Colorado seeks a wife of good character and steady temperament. Correspondence welcomed. She had stared at those words for a long time. It had taken her 3 days to write the first letter. She kept her name, kept her honesty about her values, her work ethic, her hopes. But she left one thing out. She never mentioned what she was. The letters that followed changed her. Gideon wrote with warmth and directness. He described his land, his cattle, his plans. He was not poetic, but he was real. And slowly, over months, she began to believe in the possibility of something new. When he proposed, she accepted the same night she received the letter. Now she stood in Silvage, covered in the dust of 4 days of travel, her heart beating hard against her ribs. Any moment, she would see him. Any moment, she would have to face the truth she had withheld. She had rehearsed that conversation 1,000 times on the train. How she would look at him directly, how she would not flinch, how she would speak plainly and let him decide. She had been afraid. She was still afraid. Ilara scanned the small crowd thinning out around the station platform. She did not see anyone who matched the image she had built in her mind. She turned toward the station building, toward the man in the wool vest who seemed to manage the place. "Excuse me," she said carefully. "I'm looking for Gideon Hart." The station master stopped. He looked at her, not with surprise at what she was, but with something else, something heavier. He removed his glasses slowly. He lowered his head, and when he spoke, the words arrived like something falling from a great height. "Miss," he said, "and I'm sorry. Gideon Hart passed 2 days ago." The sound of the wind, the creak of the platform boards, the distant noise of horses shifting in their ties. Ilara did not move. The future she had built, every version of it, every quiet hope she had carried across 4 days of hard rail travel, simply ceased to exist. She stood there with the letter still pressed against her ribs, and the wind kept blowing, and the world kept moving around her as if nothing at all had ended. She found a bench near the far end of the platform and sat down. The station master had said something else. Words about a dispute, about the way things sometimes went wrong out here, but she had stopped hearing after the first sentence. The sounds of Silvage continued around her. A cart rolled past. 2 men argued over a fence post near the livery. A dog barked twice and went quiet. Ilara pressed her hands flat against her knees. She had spent months imagining the moment she would arrive. Sometimes it was frightening, Gideon's face going cold at the sight of her green skin, the pointed tips of her ears, the truth she had hidden. Sometimes it was something softer, him hesitating, then nodding slowly, choosing to see her instead of her race. She had lived both versions inside her chest until she knew them by heart. She had never imagined this version. Now she would never know how he would have reacted. That question, the one that had kept her awake through dozens of nights, that had made her almost write the truth and then pull back. That question had no answer anymore. It had simply disappeared along with the man who could have answered it. She opened the travel bag at her feet and found the bundle of his letters. She did not read them. She only held them. Her money was nearly gone. She had calculated the journey carefully. Enough to arrive. Enough for the first few days until she was settled. She had not calculated for this. Nobody plans for the thing that erases the plan entirely. Going back east was not truly possible. The ticket would cost more than she had, and even if she could manage it, going back meant returning to an empty house that was no longer hers, to a community where she had slowly become invisible after her parents died. There was nothing waiting for her in that direction, but staying in a place she did not know, without work, without shelter, without a single person who owed her anything. That was its own kind of impossible. She was so focused on the math of her situation that she almost did not notice the shadow that fell across the platform boards in front of her. "You were asking about Gideon Hart." It was not a question. The voice was calm and low, the kind of voice that did not need much volume to reach you. She looked up. The man standing there was tall, genuinely tall, with the kind of build that came from years of physical work rather than any natural gift. Sandy brown hair, pushed back from his face by a hand or the wind, a short, neat beard, eyes the color of a winter sky, pale and direct. His clothes carried the honest dust of someone who had ridden that morning. He was watching her without the usual flicker she saw in strangers' eyes, that small recalibration, that moment of adjustment. He simply looked at her, the way one person looks at another. "My name is Wyatt Mercer," he said. "I knew Gideon through livestock business. I heard what happened to you just now." Ilara said nothing. She was accustomed to measuring people quickly. It was a skill that had kept her safe more than once. She looked for the thing underneath the words, the curiosity dressed as concern, the pity that wanted something in return, the discomfort trying to pass as kindness. She could not find any of those things in him. "Is there someone meeting you here?" he asked. "No," she said. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" The question was practical, direct. He did not soften it or apologize for asking it. "Not yet," she admitted. Wyatt nodded once, as if filing that information carefully. He did not rush. He did not fill the silence with reassurances he did not mean. "My sister runs a boarding house 2 streets from here," he said. "Fair price, clean rooms, decent food. She won't turn anyone away who needs help." Ilara looked at him for a long moment. She was alone. She was far from everything she knew. And this man, this stranger, had offered her the first real option she had been given since stepping off the train. She did not want to trust him, but she did not have the luxury of pride. "All right," she said quietly. She picked up her bag and stood. The wind moved through Silvage the way it always did, indifferent and constant. But somewhere in the dust and the fading afternoon light, the smallest possibility of something different had appeared. Ilara followed Wyatt Mercer off the platform and into the town she did not yet know. The streets of Silvage were narrow and sun-bleached, the kind of place that looked as if the wind had shaped it over time the way it shaped everything else in this country. Ilara walked beside Wyatt and watched. She had learned to do that. To observe quietly, to notice the things people showed before they meant to. 2 children played in the dirt outside a general store. A woman hung laundry from a rope strung between 2 posts. An older man sat on a chair outside what looked like a barber shop, watching them pass with the slow attention of someone who had nothing else to occupy his afternoon. He looked at Ilara. Then he looked away. She was familiar with that rhythm. The glance, the second glance, the careful withdrawal. She had grown up among both humans and orcs in a settlement that called itself tolerant, and mostly. She had learned early how to tell the difference between a person who truly saw her and a person who was performing the act of not minding. She kept her eyes forward and said nothing. Wyatt walked with an easy, measured stride, the kind that covered ground without seeming hurried. He pointed out a few landmarks as they moved. The sheriff's office, the feed store, the small church at the end of the main road. He did not fill the air with words, but what he said was useful. She appreciated that. "Has Silvage always had both?" she asked after a moment. He glanced at her. "Both? Humans, orcs?" She nodded toward a family moving through the market, a human man, 2 children with the pointed ears and greenish cast of half-orc blood. "They seem comfortable." "Some are," Wyatt said. "The war ended 50 years ago. Some people decided that was long enough to keep fighting it. Others didn't." He paused. "You learn who's who pretty fast out here." It was not a reassurance. It was simply the truth, offered plainly. She found herself trusting that more than reassurance would have given her. They reached the boarding house. It was a 2-story building at the edge of a quieter street, painted white once, now gone cream with age. Window boxes held dried flowers. A lamp already burned in the front window, though the sun had not yet set. The woman who opened the door looked like Wyatt around the eyes, that same direct quality, the same sense of someone who had been tested and had not softened so much as steadied. Abigail Mercer was perhaps 30, her chestnut hair pinned up with the practicality of someone who had no patience for things falling loose at inconvenient moments. She took in Ilara's travel-worn appearance and the situation Wyatt explained in a few sentences. Her expression moved through something rapid and private, and then she simply opened the door wider. "Come inside," she said. She asked no difficult questions. She showed Ilara a small, clean room on the second floor with a window that faced the back garden. The bed had a real quilt. There was a washstand with a pitcher and basin already filled. "Board includes 2 meals," Abigail said. "Breakfast at 7, supper at 6. The rate is—" She named a number that was noticeably lower than the sign in the front hallway suggested. "I can't ask you to," Ilara started. "You didn't ask. I offered." Abigail folded her hands in front of her. "No woman should face what you're facing without at least a solid roof over her head. We can talk about the rest when you've had a night's sleep." When she was gone, Ilara closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. She opened her bag and found the bundle of letters again. She set them on the quilt in front of her. Gideon's handwriting, blocky, confident. The pen pressed hard into the paper like a man not accustomed to writing, but determined to be understood, looked back at her from a dozen envelopes. She had crossed half a country for this. She put her face in her hands and allowed herself, for the first time, to feel the full weight of it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the slow, private unraveling that happens when the thing you built your hope on simply isn't there anymore. Then she breathed, and when she was steadier, she washed her face, changed her clothes, and went downstairs to supper. The dining room held 5 other guests. Abigail made introductions with the brisk efficiency of someone who ran a household through sheer force of will. The guests were travelers, and a merchant and 1 older woman who seemed to live there permanently. They were polite. One of them asked where she was from, listened to the answer, and moved the conversation forward without commentary. Wyatt was there too, at the far end of the table. He had cleaned up from the road, the same blue eyes, the same quiet. He did not draw attention to her or make her a subject. He simply included her in the conversation, as if she had always been there. It was such a small thing. She was not sure why it made her throat tighten. After supper, when the others drifted away, she and Wyatt stayed at the table a little longer. She asked about Gideon, not because the wound was healed, it wasn't, but because she needed to know who he had actually been. Wyatt chose his words with care. He described a man who was stubborn and fair, who had built something from very little, who was respected though not always easy. Ilara listened and assembled a truer picture of the man she had almost married. A real one, with edges and shadows, not the careful version he had shown her through letters. She felt grief and relief tangled together and could not entirely separate them. When she finally said goodnight and climbed the stairs, she stood at the window for a while, looking at the dark shapes of Silvage settling into evening. She was still afraid, but beneath the fear, something else had arrived. Small, quiet, not yet named, something like, maybe not yet the end. She did not sleep much. The room was warm and the quilt was soft, and those things helped for a while. But somewhere past midnight, the thinking started again. The kind that loops back on itself, that turns every option over and shows you the broken side each time. She had no money to go back. She had no home to go back to. She had arrived in a town where she knew no one, where the only person who had offered her anything was a man she had met hours ago, a stranger whose kindness she could not yet fully trust. She thought about the letters, about the months she had spent writing carefully, weighing each sentence, choosing what to reveal and what to protect. She had been honest about everything that felt safe to be honest about. Her work ethic, her values, her grief over her parents, her hope for something quieter and more stable than the uncertainty she had been living. What she had not been honest about was the one thing that might have changed everything. She pressed her hands against her eyes in the dark and remembered the night she had almost told him. She had written the words out. "I should tell you something about myself, something I should have told you at the beginning," and had sat there with the pen in her hand for a long time, reading them back. Then she had set the letter aside. Then she had written a new one that said nothing of the kind. She had told herself it was because she needed time, because she wanted him to know her first, to know her character, before he made a judgment about her blood. But the truth, the real truth she had carried underneath that story, was simpler and less flattering. She was afraid of being alone, more afraid of that than of anything else. Somewhere near dawn, she made a decision. Not a grand one, just the kind a person makes when the alternative is staying still and suffocating in their own fear. She would take the work Wyatt had offered. She would go to his ranch and do the job and earn her place. And she would not spend every day waiting for something to go wrong. She had worked hard her whole life. She knew how to manage a household, how to keep accounts, how to stretch resources until they covered what was needed. She had those skills. They were real. They were hers. In the morning, she found him at the boarding house table before the other guests came down, drinking coffee in the early quiet. "I've thought about your offer," she said. He looked up. "I'd like to accept, if it still stands." He put the cup down. "It stands," he said simply. He did not make it significant. He did not congratulate her on the decision or assure her she had made the right choice. He just acknowledged it and moved forward, which was exactly what she needed. Abigail came in shortly after and received the news with a satisfaction she did not bother hiding. She pulled Ilara aside while Wyatt settled the bill. "He's a good man," Abigail said quietly. "Stubborn sometimes, private, but his word is solid. If he tells you something, he means it." She looked at Ilara directly. "You'll be all right out there." It was said with the authority of someone who had decided it was true, not merely hoped it. "Thank you," Ilara said. "For the room, for all of it." Abigail waved her hand. "Come back and visit. We don't get enough interesting people through here." 2 mornings later, they left Silvage. Wyatt had a wagon loaded with supplies, flour, salt, tools, a crate of equipment she did not recognize yet. She sat beside him on the bench seat as the town fell behind them, and the land opened up into the kind of wide, sweeping space she had never seen before. She had grown up in a settlement bordered by trees. The West was different. The sky here was enormous, uninterrupted by anything, going all the way to the horizon in every direction. She had not expected it to feel like a kind of freedom. They talked during the ride. Wyatt described the ranch the way a person describes something they built with their own hands, with specificity and pride that was not boastfulness, just ownership. He had started as a ranch hand at 17. He had saved. He had learned every aspect of the work. He had purchased the land piece by piece over a decade. "Your sister mentioned your mother passed," Ilara said after a while. "Last winter," he said. "She ran everything inside the house. I never understood how much that was until she wasn't there to do it anymore." He said it simply, without theatre, but she heard the weight in it, the particular loneliness of a person who did not know how to describe missing someone. "What was she like?" Ilara asked. He thought about it. "Precise," he said finally. "She kept the accounts to the last cent, kept everything in its place. The house felt different after." He paused. Smaller somehow. Ilara nodded. She knew that feeling precisely. After her parents died, their home had felt like a room someone had taken all the air out of. She had moved through it for months, breathing in shallow portions. She did not say that, but she filed it away, the fact that they had both learned to live inside absence. The wagon rolled on through the afternoon, the wheels raising soft clouds of dust on the dirt road. The landscape changed gradually, scrub giving way to grassland, the occasional cottonwood lining a dry creek bed. Then a man on horseback came the opposite direction. He slowed as he passed, looked at Ilara with something flat and unpleasant in his face, and said something low that she caught only the shape of. Wyatt's jaw tightened. He turned in the seat. "Keep moving," he said. His voice had not changed volume, but something in it had sharpened. The man looked at him for a moment, then looked away and rode on. Ilara kept her eyes on the road ahead. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," Wyatt said. He did not say anything else, but he said it as if the doing had been simple, as if it was simply the right thing, and the right thing did not require explanation. She felt something loosen, very slightly, somewhere beneath her ribs. Sullivan's reach appeared in the late afternoon light, like something that had grown out of the land rather than been built on it. The main house was not grand. 2 stories of weathered wood, a wide porch wrapping around the front, windows that caught the last sun and threw it back gold. Behind it, a large barn, corrals where a dozen horses moved in the easy way of animals who were used to being looked after. Beyond that, fields and range, stretching toward a line of hills that turned blue in the distance. Ilara took it in from the wagon seat before they pulled through the gate. She had imagined many versions of what the ranch might look like, but none of them had included the particular kind of solidity this place had, the sense that it had been built slowly, with intention, each piece chosen to last. Wyatt brought the wagon to a stop near the barn. A man came from the direction of the corrals, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was large and grey-bearded, and moved with the careful economy of someone whose body had done heavy work for a long time and had learned to spend itself wisely. He looked at Ilara without pause or recalibration. "Samuel Reed," Wyatt said. "My foreman. He's been with the ranch since before the roof had shingles." "Ma'am," Samuel said, and the word was uncomplicated. Just a greeting from one person to another. Behind him, a younger man came around from the barn. He had Samuel's broad shoulders and his father's dark eyes. He introduced himself as Ethan before Wyatt could do it for him, and grinned easily. The grin of someone who had grown up in open country and had not been trained to guard his face. "Good to have help around here," Ethan said. "The house has been a disaster since—" He caught himself. For a while. It'll be good to have it sorted. Wyatt showed her through the house. The structure was sound. The furniture was solid and well made, chosen by someone with a practical eye. But the disorder was significant. Drawers not quite shut. Papers in unsorted stacks. The kitchen organized by habit rather than system. In the small room off the main hall where the ranch accounts were kept, ledger books rose in an unstable column. The entries inside them a record of someone who tracked everything, but had run out of energy to organize it. She understood immediately what was needed. Wyatt showed her the room that had been his mother's, small, with a window that faced the eastern hills and caught the morning light, a simple quilt on the bed, a small chest of drawers, a hooked rug in faded red and green. "You don't have to stay in this one," he said. "There are others. This one is fine," she said. It was more than fine. The morning light was something she had always needed, the particular gentleness of it, the way it arrived before everything else and made the world look temporary and possible at the same time. The first days were full. She began with the kitchen because order there would make everything else easier. She found a system in the chaos. Wyatt's mother had had her own logic, and once Ilara found the pattern, she could work with it, adjust it, improve it. She cleaned and organized and sorted with the focused attention of someone who finds genuine satisfaction in bringing order to disorder. Then she turned to the ledger books. She had learned to keep accounts from her father, who had kept them for a small cooperative in their settlement. She understood the language, how numbers told a story, how a column of figures could reveal a year's worth of decisions. Wyatt's records were honest and thorough, but the system was haphazard, the categories inconsistent. It took her 3 days to understand the existing logic. Then she began again. On the 4th evening, Wyatt came into the accounting room and found her at the desk with 2 ledger books open in front of her and a new register she had started in her own hand beside them. He stood in the doorway. "You don't have to work this late," he said. "I'm almost finished with this quarter," she said without looking up. Then she did look up and saw something in his expression she could not immediately name. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. He looked at the desk, at the neatly ordered rows of figures. "My mother spent 3 days every month on the accounts. It was her great labor. She used to say she'd rather pull a calf in the rain than balance a quarter." Ilara looked at the ledger. She had good instincts. "The categories are logical. I just made them consistent." Something shifted in his face. "Thank you," he said, "for that." She thought he meant the accounting. Later, lying in the room that caught the morning light, she wondered if he meant something else. The way she had spoken of his mother as someone with sense, someone whose work had mattered. She thought about her own mother, about the particular strength of Orc women, the depth that people who had never known one could not easily see. Her mother had kept their family in order through 2 floods, a drought, and a winter so cold it killed 3 of the settlement's horses. She had done it quietly, without asking to be noticed. Ilara had inherited her hands, she thought, the same wide, capable hands. She pressed them flat against the quilt. In the morning she would finish the quarter accounts, and the day after that she would begin on the ones that came before. The weeks settled into a rhythm. Ilara rose before dawn, the way she always had, and started the kitchen fire and had water heated by the time the ranch hands came in for breakfast. Samuel ate with them at the long table in the kitchen. Wyatt usually appeared later, after the first rounds of morning work, and drank his coffee standing at the door that looked out over the corrals. She learned the shapes of his days, how he moved through the ranch, methodically, checking each thing in an order that did not vary, speaking to each animal and each man with the same unhurried attention. How he made decisions. He listened to Samuel first, always, then formed his own view, then stated it without decoration. She learned that he was not a man who said unnecessary things. The house changed. She could see it happening in small increments, a drawer that closed properly, a shelf that held its contents in visible logic, a counter clean enough to work on without moving things first. Samuel mentioned it one morning while she was checking the vegetable garden her predecessor had planted and half abandoned. "The place feels like itself again," he said simply. She did not know what it had felt like before, but she understood what he meant. The accounts were nearly in order. Weeks of careful work had rebuilt the system from the inside out, and now the numbers moved the way numbers should, telling a clear story about where the ranch's money went and what it returned. She had found 2 small inefficiencies in the supply ordering that would save real money over a year. She had mentioned them to Wyatt one evening without ceremony, just, "Here is the problem, here is the solution." He had looked at the figures for a long time. "I've been ordering from Callaway's general store for 8 years, he said, out of habit. "The price difference is $40 a year, she said. "My mother would have found that faster than me," he said. It was not self-criticism, just acknowledgement. "She may have known," Ilara said, "and decided the relationship with Callaway was worth the cost." He looked at her. Something in his expression changed. A small recalibration, as if she had said something unexpected. "That's possible," he said. After that, he started bringing her questions she had not asked to be brought. Small things at first. "What do you think about timing the cattle sale before the fall market?" Then larger ones. She answered carefully, with the precision she had been trained to, adding numbers where numbers helped, and context where context mattered. She had not expected to be asked. She had not expected many things about Sullivan's reach. One afternoon, Samuel's son, Ethan, appeared at the kitchen door with a small rip in his vest and a sheepish expression. "Do you know how to mend?" he asked. "Sit down," she said. She worked while he talked, about the ranch, about the country, about his father's history with Wyatt. Ethan talked easily, the way people do when they have no particular guard up, and Ilara found herself relaxing into the conversation in a way she had not done since leaving home. "Pa says Wyatt's the most decent man he's ever worked for," Ethan said, "and Pa's worked for 7 different ranches." "That's a real endorsement," Ilara said. "It's just the truth," Ethan said in a tone that did not expect disagreement. She thought about that later, washing the supper dishes while the light went gold outside the window. Decent. It was a quieter word than she was used to looking for. She had looked for safety, for stability, for someone who would not flinch at what she was. She had not been looking for decency. She was beginning to think it might be the most important thing. The thought arrived at the same time as Wyatt appeared in the kitchen doorway, back from the evening rounds, dust still on his boots, looking for the coffee she usually kept warm. "I'll finish those," he said, nodding at the dishes. "I'm almost done," she said. "You've been at it since before I got up," he said. "I'm serious. Leave them." She stepped back from the basin. He took over at the washstand without ceremony, sleeves already rolled from the barn work. She sat at the kitchen table. It was the first time in as long as she could remember that someone had made her stop working and simply rest. She did not know what to do with her hands. Outside, the night settled over Sullivan's Reach, the particular deep quiet of land far from any town, full of cricket sound and the distant call of something in the hills. Stars came out above the horizon in the numbers you only see when there is nothing between you and them. She watched Wyatt's back as he finished the dishes and thought about her mother, and about the way certain people simply make the room feel different when they are in it. Not loudly, not with any announcement. Just differently, more settled, more safe. She thought, "I did not expect any of this." Then she thought, maybe that is the point. She had been at Sullivan's Reach for 6 weeks when the trouble came. It did not arrive dramatically. It rarely did, in her experience. It came the way most hard things came, quietly, by degrees, until it was standing in front of you and there was no pretending it wasn't there. 2 men rode into the ranch in the middle of the morning, when Wyatt was out in the far fields with Samuel, and Ilara was alone in the house with the account books. She heard the horses and looked out the window and saw them. Neither man familiar to her, both wearing expressions she recognized from years of practice. She went to the porch. They asked for Wyatt. She said he was out on the property. They looked at her the way that particular kind of man looks, not seeing her so much as cataloguing her, deciding what category she belonged to. "You the help?" one of them said. "I manage the household and the accounts," she said. The other one laughed, not pleasantly. She kept her voice and her face steady. She had learned that showing anger to men like this accomplished nothing useful and sometimes made things worse. She asked if they wanted to leave a message. They said no. They said they'd be back, and the way they said it carried a weight that was not accidental. When they had gone, she went back inside and stood in the accounting room for a long moment, with her hands flat on the desk. Then she picked up the pen and went back to work. She told Wyatt that evening. She described the men carefully, what they looked like, what they'd said, the exact words, the exact tone. He listened without interrupting, his face going through something she was learning to read, the particular stillness of someone filing information with great precision. "I know who they are," he said when she finished. "They've been trying to buy the eastern parcel of land for 2 years. I won't sell it." "Why do they want it?" "Water rights," he said. "There's a spring on that parcel. If they own the water, they can control who else can operate in this valley." She understood immediately. "So this is not really about the land?" "No," he said. "And they think if they make things difficult enough, you'll sell." He looked at her. "People like that usually do think something like that." She thought for a moment. "There's a way to make the eastern parcel harder to contest legally," she said. "If the land records show active, ongoing productive use, registered, time-stamped, it strengthens your claim against any challenge. I've seen it done in disputes back east. I can look at your land documents. If there are gaps, we fill them." The stillness in his face changed. Something opened behind his eyes. "You know land law?" he said. "I know how records work," she said. "And I know that sometimes the best defense is good paperwork." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll get the documents," he said. They spent 3 evenings at the dining room table with land records and survey maps spread between them. She asked questions, and he answered. She found 2 places in the documentation where the recording was incomplete, and showed him how to address them. Samuel came in on the 2nd evening and sat with them, adding his own knowledge of the property's history. On the 3rd evening, when the work was done, Wyatt sat back in his chair and looked at what they had assembled. "This is better than what my lawyer had," he said. "Your lawyer charges by the hour," she said. "He may have hurried." He laughed. It was quiet, honest, and she realized she had not heard him laugh before. It changed his face completely, made it younger, made the carefully maintained distance in it briefly disappear. She felt something shift in her chest, something she was not ready to name. The men came back once more, a week later. This time Wyatt was there. The conversation was short. He showed them nothing of the work they had done, just looked at them with the even calm of someone who knows exactly where they stand. They rode away. She watched from the porch until they were out of sight, and then turned back to the house and found Wyatt standing behind her. "Thank you," he said, "for the work on the records, and for the other thing." "What other thing?" "Staying steady," he said. "When they came the first time, a lot of people wouldn't have." She met his eyes, blue and direct in the afternoon light. "I've had practice," she said simply. He nodded once, and she went inside, and she held that moment in her chest the way you hold something you're not sure yet what to do with, carefully, with both hands, aware that it is fragile. Fall came to Sullivan's reach, the way it came to all high country, suddenly and completely, as if the land had simply decided. The mornings were cold now, the breath visible on the way to the barn. The hills behind the ranch had gone through amber and rust and were settling into the stark, honest lines of autumn. The grass flattened and pale, the cottonwoods along the creek holding their last yellow leaves against a sky that had deepened to something that felt like a promise. Ilara found she loved it. She had not expected to love any specific thing about this place. She had come with such modest hopes, just safety and usefulness and a place that would keep her. But the fall light on this particular land had worked its way inside her and settled there. She was thinking about her mother one morning at the kitchen window, about the way Orc women carried grief like a second skeleton, structural and invisible, present in every movement. When Wyatt came in from the early round earlier than usual, she turned from the window. "Something happened?" she asked. "No," he said. He poured coffee. He stood at the counter instead of moving toward the door the way he usually did. "I've been thinking about something." She waited. "You've been here 3 months," he said. "Almost 4, she said. "Almost 4. He turned the cup in his hands. "I've been meaning to say, what you've done here, with the house, the accounts, the land documents." He stopped. "It's more than I hired you for. More than I expected. You gave me a place when I had nowhere to go," she said. "I've tried to earn that." "You've done more than earn it," he said. He looked at her directly. The way she had learned, he looked at things he was serious about. "I want to adjust what I'm paying you." "Wyatt, it's fair," he said. "Not generosity, just what the work is worth." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "All right." He nodded. Then he did not leave. She turned back toward the stove, but she was aware of him behind her in a way she was always aware of him. That particular steady presence, like something reliable that you stop noticing because you have started to count on it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes. The letters you wrote to Gideon." He paused. "Did you tell him everything?" She went very still. She had not talked about the letters, not in any real way. She had answered questions about Gideon, and she had been honest about why she had come, but this was different. She turned around. "No," she said. "I didn't." He waited. "I didn't tell him I was half Orc," she said. "I was afraid he wouldn't write back." She kept her voice even. "I told myself I'd tell him in person, that he'd know me first, by letter, and that would be enough. But the truth is I was afraid, and I let that fear make the decision." She held his gaze. "I don't tell that story well," she said. "There's no version of it where I look entirely honest." Wyatt was quiet for a long time. "My mother was wrong about one thing," he said finally. She waited. "She used to say that you could tell everything important about a person from how they handled hardship." He set the cup down. "I think you can also tell it from how they talk about the moments they're not proud of." Something broke open very quietly behind her ribs. She did not let it show, not all of it. But she thought he saw something, because his expression changed. Not much, just enough. "I should get back out," he said. "Yes," she said. He went to the door. He paused there a moment, his hand on the frame, his back to her. "Ilara," he said. "Yes, I'm glad you came." A beat. "I know the circumstances were—" He stopped. "I'm glad you're here." He went out into the cold morning. She stood at the kitchen window for a long time after, watching the way the early light moved across the frost-covered ground, the way it made everything it touched look briefly extraordinary. She pressed her hand flat against her chest. Something she had carried for a very long time, the particular loneliness of a person who had stopped expecting to be wanted anywhere, had shifted. It was still there, but it had moved, made room for something else. She thought, "I think I love this place." Then, with the honesty she had promised herself she would keep from now on, "I think it may be more than the place." She turned back to the stove and finished making breakfast. Outside, she could hear Samuel and Ethan coming across the yard, talking with the easy familiarity of men who had worked together a long time. The horses were moving in the corral. A hawk turned slow circles above the eastern field. The world of Sullivan's Reach continued its ordinary morning, and in the kitchen, something that had been afraid for a very long time was, very slowly, learning not to be. The snow came early. A week before anyone expected it, the sky closed over and the temperature dropped in the night, and by morning Sullivan's Reach lay under 4 inches of white that muffled everything. The usual sounds of the ranch, the wind, even the light itself, which arrived softer and more diffuse through the overcast sky. Ilara stood on the porch in the cold with a shawl around her shoulders and watched it. She was 4 months along now. She had known for 6 weeks. She had told Wyatt on a Tuesday evening in the accounting room, with the lamp burning low between them, choosing that room because it was where they did their most practical work together, and this felt like something that required that kind of honesty, the plain, lamplit kind. He had been very still for a moment. Then he had said, "Will you marry me?" Not dramatically, not with speeches, just that. The same directness he brought to every important thing, the same quality of a person who had already thought it through and arrived at the only conclusion that made sense to him. She had said yes. The wedding had been small. Abigail came from town. Samuel and Ethan stood at the back. The minister from the Silvage church, a tall, tired-looking man with a kind expression, read the words with the same care he would have given any couple. He did not pause over anything. He did not make it notable. It was simply the joining of 2 people who had decided. She had cried a little, standing there in the dress Abigail had helped her alter, Wyatt's hand warm and steady around hers. Not from overwhelming joy, or not only from that, from something more complex, the accumulation of everything it had taken to get here, the months of fear and loss and careful hoping, the morning on the platform in Silvage when she had believed it was over. She had thought then that her life was ending. She understood now that it had only been changing shape. The snow on the porch was cold beneath her feet through the wool socks. She stayed there anyway, watching the world go white and quiet. Behind her, inside the house, she could hear Wyatt moving in the kitchen, the scrape of the stove door, the sound of water being poured. He had told her to stay in bed, that he would handle breakfast this morning. She had told him she was fine. Both things were true. He brought her coffee without being asked. He came through the door, wrapped a blanket over the shawl without ceremony, and stood beside her on the porch looking at the snow. They stood there in the cold together for a while. "It looks different in snow," she said. "It does," he said. "My mother used to say snow forgives the land, makes everything start even." She thought about that. The ranch under snow, all the marks of the year covered and smoothed, the worn path to the barn, the ruts of the wagon road, the places where the grass had been overgrazed, all of it white now, all of it the same. "Lydia," she said. He looked at her. "If she's a girl," she said. "I've been thinking Lydia." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My mother's name." "Yes," Ilara said, "if you don't mind." He looked out at the snow for a long time. "I don't mind," he said. His voice was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that is not absence but presence, the sound of something felt too completely to be spoken at full volume. Samuel appeared across the yard, coming from the barn, his breath making clouds in the cold air. He raised a hand when he saw them on the porch, and they raised theirs back. Ethan appeared behind him, said something that made Samuel laugh, and the 2 of them went on about the morning work. The hawk was back above the eastern field, barely visible through the falling snow. Ilara leaned slightly against Wyatt's arm. He shifted to let her, not making it significant. Just accommodating, the way you make room for something you want to stay. Her hands rested over her middle. She thought about her mother, about the strength she had carried without ever calling it strength, about the way orc women loved, not gently, not at a distance, but with the full weight of themselves present in every room they entered. She thought, I will teach her that. She thought, I will teach her all of it. She thought, Lydia Mercer, with her blue-green eyes and her light-green skin, born at Sullivan's Reach in the first snow of the year, to a father who is honest and steady, and a mother who crossed half a country on nothing but fear and hope. She will know from the very beginning that she belongs here. The snow kept falling. Wyatt's arm came around her, unhurried, the way he did everything. The ranch settled deeper into its white quiet. The horses moved in the barn. The fire crackled inside the house. The smell of coffee came through the open door and mixed with the cold, clean smell of snow. Ilara closed her eyes. She listened to all of it, the ordinary sounds of a life that had taken the longest, hardest road to reach her. She had arrived one day late, and she was, at last, exactly where she was supposed to be.